It is my great pleasure to introduce Eliana Ferrara today. Eliana is an economist, like working in development and political economy. She comes from Bocconi. She graduated from Harvard in 1999, I believe. If you have to describe her, like much of her work is about the role of political conflict and institutions, but I often think of her as a, all-terrain empirical economist. She has worked on a variety of very exciting and diverse issues, like things like racial bias in capital punishment, or how soap operas affect fertility decisions in Brazil, or detecting which companies cheat on arm embargoes for countries in conflict. But no matter what is the topic is about, like when you read when you're about to read one of La Ferrara's papers, you know that it's going to be an extremely creative paper, like masterfully executed, and that will stay in your mind. It will going to make a mark. So we have been willing to have you here for a long time, and it's great to have you here today and talking about COVID and learning and kids, and it's something that is very close to my heart and very close to the heart of many people in the audience. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for coming and being with us today virtually.
Thank you, Alberto. That was such a nice introduction. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I'll try to remember it in my lows over the coming weeks. And nice to see you all. I recognize Sarah, that I'm super happy to see. I hope everything is well. So let me get started, because I know that I will already not make it in the time I'm given. So I want to present a paper that's actually, in fact, was born out of a very personal experience here last spring in the first wave of the pandemic in Italy. I hope you're seeing my screen right now. Great. So, and this is an education paper that I wrote with a former PhD student of mine, Michela Carlana, who's now at HKS. And we're now familiar, unfortunately, with this situation where the pandemic has led most countries to close schools. And estimates of learning losses associated with these closures range from 0.3 standard deviations to overall 0.9 years of schooling for countries that close schools over 7 months. And there are psychological effects that are becoming clearer and clearer as the period gets prolonged. Now, schools and governments had tried to mitigate these learning losses by investing in remote instruction. So teachers have tried to adapt to some extent to distance learning, but there's a lot of variation even within country. And these variations tend to correlate with the socioeconomic status of the family or the child, which potentially exacerbates existing inequalities. So this is a graph that you might have seen. It's been produced by the Opportunity Insights team, and it tracks performance in math on an online platform for kids around the time when school shut down in the US last year. And you can see 3 lines. One is for low income, middle income, and high income neighborhood schools, okay? And you can see clearly a drop following school closures, but for high income schools, this is somewhat negligible or picks up again, while you see middle income and low income remaining permanently below in terms of math performance on this platform. And if you were to do the same graph by race or racial composition of the neighborhood, it would look very similar, okay? With Caucasian, majority Caucasian neighborhoods being the top line and the remaining ones below. So what we've done was basically to create a program and evaluate it last year in Italy, which was the first country after China to be severely affected by the pandemic. We realized that despite efforts by the government to switch to online education, lower grades, primary and middle schools, were a little behind, also, partly because of the kids, partly because of the teaching body. And so we decided we were going to try and offer some resources targeting middle school pupils. So these will be grades 6 to 8, who were from a disadvantaged background, either in terms of socioeconomic status or language spoken, or because of learning difficulties. And so these kids were identified by the schools as those who were lagging behind during distance learning. And what we did when we thought of which program we wanted was, first of all, rely entirely on something that could be delivered without in-person interaction. So this was a tutoring program that was entirely done online using PCs, tablet, or smartphones. Second, because we couldn't raise money or organize anything that required time, all we were able to do was to just issue a call for action among our students, so university students from 3 large universities in Milan. And these were not professional tutors, but we trained and supported them through another online platform that we built together with pedagogical experts, okay? So compared to the tutoring program that are typically evaluated in the education literature, this is very low cost because the tutors weren't paid, but also it has a different flavor because the interaction between tutor and tutee is somehow shaped by the fact that this volunteer is really highly motivated, okay? So we're not paying people. The reason they're there is that they believe they want to help these kids. And so we believe that part of what made the program a success could have been also the fact that it leverages intrinsic motivation. So we expected when we designed this that there would be a lot of demand for these tutoring services, but possibly fewer tutors available than were needed. And so we informed everybody ahead of time that in case of excess demand, we would run a lottery, okay? So we have this oversubscription design where we randomly chose which students received a tutor. So this will allow us to study the extensive margin of being assigned to the program. The number of hours of tutoring, so the intensive margin, and that's because only a fraction of the tutors told us that they could teach every day, and many, many kids needed help every day. So we basically randomized who got the tutor, who was putting in more hours. And then because of this assignment method, the characteristics of the tutor and the students are matched in a random way so that we can check whether certain tutors are more effective with certain students, okay? And just to give you a preview of what we're finding, we administered a standardized test after a duration of about 6 weeks, okay? So this program started in mid-April and we ran it until the beginning of June. So over this period, kids improved their performance by a quarter of a standard deviation. They had higher educational aspirations and socio-emotional skills, in particular locus of control, and they were doing better in terms of psychological well-being, less depression and more happiness as reported by themselves. So we think that this work clearly is inspired by the literature on tutoring, but as I said, it is quite different in terms of the cost, the scalability, and potentially compared to the in-person interaction, this is a tool that could be used to reach students in remote locations. It need not be specific just to these pandemic times, okay? You could think of this as a way to reach students in different countries or in, say, neighborhoods where it's difficult to or dangerous to go. So we are really thinking of it as something that's worth studying and possibly investing in as a complement to regular education. There's also potentially less stigma associated with it, as it's less observable than the in-person tutoring. There's a growing literature now on education impacts of COVID, and here there's almost nothing done, at least until this year. Now I think more people are trying to implement programs of these inspired by this on how to support education to mitigate effects of COVID. And in our case, we think that also the age group that we target and we reach compared to existing work is particularly crucial, and one of the groups that's most severely affected, for example, psychologically. Okay, let me go a little bit faster here and tell you, I want to tell you how the program works, because in fact, as I said, part of our our thinking also went into how to design it and implement it. We didn't have an organization to rely on, and then present data and results. So Italy diagnosed the first case of COVID on February 19th, and exactly 2 weeks afterwards, the schools were closed. So it was an extremely fast and possibly unexpected reaction. So people were ordered to stay home and regions were isolated. Then these measures were subsequently renewed, and schools never reopened. So basically we went into the summer without reopening schools. 2 weeks after the lockdown was announced, we contacted the rectors of 3 large universities in Milan, asking them if they could let us, try this crazy idea that we had. And they were absolutely supportive, so that we advertised this, volunteering opportunity among all of these students, BA and master students, and we got an incredible response, okay? I will tell you more about that. 10 days later, we were ready to roll. We had the IRB clearance, and we emailed the principals of all Italian middle schools saying that we were offering this service. We emailed the university students, and we started activities on April 14th. So this is, a bit over a month. And I'm just stressing this because although I'm sure it can be perfected and improved, it is something that can be done in emergency conditions. So the program worked in a very unregulated way, if you wish, from the point of view of the platform and the technology. What the tutor and the student had to do is just find a way to connect. It was up to them whether they wanted to use Zoom, Skype, whatever it was. Here you see a picture from an article that appeared on a magazine where the kid is really happy to say that his tutor is connected from Helsinki because she was an Italian student on Erasmus. So she received the message, but she was, teaching him from abroad. But basically, this was something that tutor and tutee could arrange between themselves. How did we recruit participants? For the schools, we presented this as an initiative of a research team, and we asked them to select up to 3 students per class who needed the program the most, okay? So last year, basically, that's all we did. We said, give us 3 names, and then we'll do our best to give them a tutor. This year, we are running a second edition, this time for the full year. And we plan on studying a bit more in depth how these kids are selected. So what is the criterion that's used to select who gets put forward for the program. The school also had to tell us which were the subjects on which tutoring should occur between three broad categories, that is the math, science, technology, Italian, history and geography, or English, and they could indicate more than one. And the school had to verify that the parents consented and had internet at home, okay? We, of course, sent a form to the parents and to the kids for consent and assent, but we wanted the school to make sure that they could pass their contacts on to us, and also that there was this minimum feasibility requirement of having a connection. Now, at the time, we asked for a PC or a tablet, and everybody said they had it. It turns out that 20% of the kids actually did the tutoring on the smartphone, okay? And I will show you that there is absolutely no difference in impact between the kids who took this tutoring on the smartphone and those who took it on the computer and tablet, which was surprising to us, okay? Then parents and children completed a baseline survey, and this made them a potential beneficiary, which means that they enter the lottery. For the tutors, similarly, we advertise it with an email as a research initiative of me and Michela, and we told them that they could indicate in which of the three subject areas they felt comfortable tutoring. We also told them that they would just need to help kids with homework. There was no need to prepare extra material. This was on a voluntary basis, but they had available a new online training course that they could take, which modules they wanted, and that we put together in those 3 weeks of preparation, okay? So these were like videos and slides on how to teach different subjects, how to establish a relationship with the kid, which platforms to use, how to teach kids with dyslexia or dyscalculia or this type of resources. Also they had a support line so that if anything happened with the kid or they had problem, these experts in pedagogy could get on a one-to-one call or arrange for group meetings. So this way we felt comfortable that there was some professional backing up the activity in case of difficulties. And then once the tutor completed the questionnaire, they also became part of the sample of eligible tutors, okay? So in the end, we worked with 76 schools over Italy. Most of them were in the north because in the first wave of the pandemic, that was the part of the country that was hit. We received over 1,000 applications from students, and we matched half of them to the tutors. Now, this was not because we didn't have enough volunteers. Actually, we had over 1,500 tutors who wanted to participate, but we didn't have enough money to pay the pedagogical experts for the hours that they would spend with the tutors. So, and also administrative capacity to manage these teams of tutors. So it was actually a supply constraint on our side, okay? And yep.
Sorry, how did you choose the tutors who participated then?
Yes, so that's a very good question, thank you. What we did was we took everybody who had, so we gave them a choice of tutoring a minimum of 3 hours, okay, or multiple of that. So we took, it turns out that I think 80% of the applicants wanted to do only 3 hours. And what we did was that everybody who wanted to do 6 hours, we took, okay? Then if you had previous experience tutoring, we also took you. But again, most of them had done it because they do it like in high school or stuff like that. Eventually, what ended up being a criterion was also that we had a lot of demand for maths, okay? And so some of the tutors who were left out were those who had not indicated maths among the subjects that they wanted to study. But no other criterion was used, no GPA, nothing else. It was mostly the subjects and the amount of hours that they were willing to teach. Now, so we're going to have 500 treated students and 529 controls. We stratified by school and grade. And as I said, although 81% of the students needed help in more than one subject, only 141 tutors out of these 530 gave availability for 6 hours. So that's going to create the variation on the intensive margin. Also, the schools, for some reason, when we said, give us names of kids who are struggling during this time, did not interpret it strictly as a socioeconomic disadvantage, because about a third of the students who were put forward were students who had learning disorders, okay? So this is more than you would have in a regular class. And we basically didn't have any tutor, 21 in all, who had been trained for that. So it was quite striking to us also that eventually, as you will see, these kids with the DSA is the Italian acronym for these disorders, that these seem to be some of the kids who benefited the most from the program. So I told you already about the training. Just to give you a sense, there was this online platform with videos and slides. There was this supervised forum. The counseling was done with regular meetings and one-to-one meetings, but all of this was, you know, if you wanted, you used it. If you didn't want, we didn't force you to, okay? In terms of duration, the number of meetings ranged from 0 to a maximum of 40, but you know, on average, they had, I think, somewhere around the model was, I think, 16. And then in terms of days, again, most kids had about 1.5 months of training. As I told you, math was by far the subject on which people wanted help the most, either in isolation or in combination with Italian and English. And this is a timeline. The baseline was done in the beginning of April, tutoring halfway through the months, and then the end line was done in June, okay? So in terms of data, we administered questionnaires to parents, students, tutors, and teachers, asking for academic outcomes and beliefs, aspirations, socio-emotional skills, and well-being. So at the time, this was, you know, it was very, very early. So we put all of these measurements in, but we didn't know yet how serious the consequences, for example, in terms of mental health would have been for the students. But luckily we have at least 2 indicators. And balance is good. So the randomization worked. Just to about 60% of the students are male and about 23% are immigrants. As I said, 1/3 have these learning disorders, okay? Then the empirical specification is super simple. It's basically a regression where outcome for a given student in a given randomization round. I didn't explain this, sorry, but to start as soon as possible, we took applications in batches, and for every batch of about 100 applications, we randomized half into treatment, half into controls. So we're gonna use dummies for these randomization rounds, and we'll regress it on some socio-economic background and controls at the student level, the randomization block dummies and the treatment indicator, correcting for multiple hypothesis testing. So
Eliana?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt again. Did you say what the control group, what their experience was? Were they in online school? Were they in no school at all?
Yeah, no, I didn't say it, sorry. Everybody was in online school because what the government did was to say, we're closing schools, but basically from about 1 week or 2 weeks after the lockdown, teachers had to connect with their students, okay? Many schools were already using platform on which the teachers were saving the grades, okay? And so they called it an electronic registry or something like that. But they had never taught that way, okay? So some teachers were fast to figure out how to do it. Others were terrible. But basically, formally, there was school, okay? The worst teachers, what they would do was just to post assignments and then not connect. The best teachers were every day logging in and using, whiteboards and so on. There's quite a bit of heterogeneity, and we don't have a very good. We've asked if the teachers, to our teachers, if they had connected online by the end of May. And I think 85 to 90% of the teachers was doing it. But in the early phase, let's say in April, we don't have a measure of how many, okay? But it was not a complete shutdown. There was this online education ongoing.
Okay, great, thank you.
So here is a first stage, basically asking, did these kids who received a tutor work harder, okay? And here you see time devoted to homework for treated and control students. Treated are the red bars and control are the blue bars. And you can see the distribution shifts to the right. So they spend more time doing homework. Also teachers, you could say, they're just reporting it, but not doing it. Here is the data from the teachers for the same students. So when we interviewed teachers, we asked data for every student, treated and control. And you can see that also the teachers report more regularity in the way homework was handed in by treated students. In terms of time, on average, we estimate almost 10 more minutes per day, which doesn't seem a lot, but these kids are not studying an awful lot, okay? So the mean of the dependent variable is about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So that's okay. And one interesting result for what you were saying, Sarah, attendance to online classes. It picks up a positive impact when it's reported by the teachers. So in column 8, okay? The program doesn't seem to affect attendance when reported by students and by parents. But if you look at the mean of the dependent variable in the control group, you can see that students and parents greatly over-report attendance, okay? So teachers say that only 57% of the time they attend class, and everybody here says 80 to 88% of the time. So we think the reliable effect is the one coming from teacher reports in this case. And another thing is the treated students find classes less difficult, and they say that they like those subjects more, okay? Possibly this leads them to behave better because in column 9, teachers report fewer issues in terms of disciplinary problems or behavior during online classes. So there seems to have been an improvement also in the way these kids followed regular learning with their teachers. Now, the key outcome for us in terms of learning is the result of a test which included standardized multiple choice questions for Italian, maths, and English that we took from previous years' tests that get administered regularly in Italy. And so this test was taken by the kids alone, online, but supervised by one of our enumerators so that they wouldn't ask their parents or anybody, and then we grade it, and this is the result aggregated for all 3 subjects. The improvement for kids who got the tutor is 1/4 of a standard deviation, Okay, now this is quite sizable given the amount of time they had the tutor, and also it seems as if both the students, their parents, and the teacher understood and believed that this would happen, because we asked them to guess how many of those questions they got right, okay, before seeing the results. And you see that treated students have higher expectations, and correctly so, okay? Then the last thing I want to show you is these columns 8 and 9. Sorry, I'm going a little bit faster because I want to get to the part of heterogeneous effects at the end. And this is not performance in the standardized test. This is a grade going from 1 to 10, which is what's used in schools, in Italian middle school, to mark the students, and the passing grade is 6. Okay, so as you can see, and then we asked students what grade they expected to get, and we asked teachers how they assessed the achievement of the student on this 1 to 10 scale. So you can see that in both cases, we're just around the passing threshold, okay, with students having a bit more optimistic expectations. And in both cases, the tutoring leads to an improvement in the grade that the students expect or that the teachers say they would give. And so this is quite interesting because it confirms what our test shows.
Eliana, was
yes.
there a difference in performance if it was math, or did you look at by subject also?
Yes, we did. And here is the next table.
Okay.
So, in fact, no, thank you. Maybe I should have put it earlier, but so this is all this table. The first column is just the standardized test, and then you have the same variables as before, the grade and the beliefs. So the one subject on which you see the most consistent positive impact is maths, which is in fact what most of them covered, okay? To be honest, on the standardized test, the impact is there for all 3 subjects, okay? And so we think that part of what this was also a motivation or ability to focus that students might have applied to other subjects. Something interesting is that we tried also matching the background of the tutor, whether they were coming from a STEM or not faculty, and whether these affected performance in different subjects. And that element didn't seem to matter at all, okay? So there is some learning, but possibly the extent to which the competencies of our university students match the needs of these kids was already good enough, regardless of which particular faculty you were coming from, okay? Then I told you we also asked about aspirations, which meant, would you like to go to university? This was middle school, so they still had to do high school, okay? Do you think you would have the skills to go to university? And although we have a positive coefficient, it's very imprecise. The one case where we get closer to statistically significant effects is when we look at a nearer objective in terms of time, which is what type of high school you want to attend. And here in Italy, it's divided in 3 groups: vocational, technical, and academic. And so you can see that the treatment reduces the probability that these kids want to go to vocational. Vocational is clearly a lower level in terms of how demanding it is. You can't enroll into college through vocational high school, for example. And we thought that this could be an element here, because these tutors somehow also served as role models. So these were like big brothers or sisters who had gone on to study. And in the case where the relationship, works well, you can also maybe start thinking that this is something you might want to do. So we thought there could be effects there, and we find, although not very robust in terms of significant positive effects there. So for socio-emotional skills, we measure 3 things. One is we gave them a logic task, and then we asked them if they wanted to stop there, take another task of the same difficulty, or take another task that was more difficult, okay? And qualitatively, we see an increase in those willing to take a more difficult task, a decrease in those giving up, but none of this is significant. We also measured grit using Angela Duckworth's instrument, and again there we don't find significant effects. The one where we find a positive and significant effect is this locus of control, so a measure that says whether the child thinks that through their efforts they are able to control the outcome of what happens to them, okay? And this remains significant, although at the 10% level, after we control for multiple hypothesis testing. The last element is, how does this affect psychological well-being? Treated students are less likely to report that they're depressed and more likely to report happiness. This is especially so as perceived by the parent of the student, okay? Now, this and the final table is one where everything is put in standard deviations. And again, we correct across these indices. So we do these overall families of variables. And in this respect, you see positive effects across the board, but the stronger ones are on performance and well-being, okay? So what I want to do next is go a little bit more into the effects in terms of intensity, heterogeneity by the technology used for tutoring, and then all the match between student-tutor characteristics, socioeconomic background of the family, and so on. Okay, and the last thing I will show you is actually the effect on the tutors themselves, because given that not every university student was selected to be a tutor, we try to understand how this experience of tutoring shapes you, okay? Which exposed, I wish we had devoted a lot more time in terms of number of questions to understand it, but at least we have something. So I told you about this intensive treatment, meaning basically 6 hours per week instead of 3. This is not a little, okay? It's connecting 1 hour every day for a month and a half with a kid who sometimes may not have any intention of studying for that hour. And this year, where our tutors have been working from end of October until now, we are seeing how hard it is. So, you know, keeping this tutoring on a purely voluntary basis and with the kids engaged for a year has been extremely challenging, but they've done it. So I'm actually amazed by this. These students, honestly. Now, what you have to understand here is that basically 1/3 of the students, of those who needed help in multiple subjects, got 6 hours, and the remaining 2/3 got only 3 hours, okay? So what is the effect of having a double treatment instead of just 3 hours? It's doubling performance gains, okay? So this dummy, the first one, is takes value 1 for anybody who got a tutor. And then the second dummy takes value 1 if you got a tutor who offers 6 hours. So you see that there's an increase of about 0.2 standard deviation for every 3 hours you add here. So in this range, the production function is linear. Okay, we can't say what it would be like in you know, over 20 hours per week or 1 hour per week, but between 3 and 6, the performance gains double. Interestingly, you don't see any significant effects on the other dimensions from the more intense tutoring. So it seems that for establishing whatever, you know, relationship or help, other forms of help from the tutor, 3 hours were enough. For the learning, the extra 3 hours were a benefit. Now, for heterogeneity, I will start showing you a bunch of regressions with interaction terms. And then we also did a more systematic analysis with machine learning. But let me start with these simpler regressions. The first dimension was access to technology. 20% of the students used a smartphone for the tutoring. And we thought ex ante, I will confess, that this would be less effective, okay? The reason we are now exposed happy that we didn't find it to be less effective is that if you think of scaling up in contexts where maybe people wouldn't have easy access to computers or tablet, like low-income countries, the fact that you can administer it over a smartphone is of particular advantage, okay? And then these are the other dimensions, but let me not go over it now. So here you see the results on the 4 indices: performance, aspiration, socio-emotional skills, and well-being. And treatment is 1 if you got a tutor, regardless of how the tutoring was done. And this is a dummy for whether you tutored on the phone, okay? How do we know this? Because our tutors were filling registries for every meeting. They were saying how the tutoring occurred and which was the device used, okay? So we know about this 20% over the phone. And you see that basically there's no significant effect. There is a very small but very precise reduction on the performance. On aspiration, the magnitude is larger, so it seems to cancel out, although again, it's not significant. On the other 2 dimensions is also relatively small and insignificant. So for me right now, the key thing is that the advantage that I would have expected in terms of academic learning from tablet or computer is nowhere close to my prior. So this means it's worked pretty well with the phone. Now, what are the heterogeneous effects? Let's start looking at the kids, okay? Here you compare boys and girls, natives and immigrants, and kids with learning disorders and without, okay? There's no gender differential, no differential by nationality, but you see that the kids with learning disorders benefit more in terms of performance, although the effect is there also for the other ones. Interesting, family background matters, as we would expect. So if your parents have college, then the impact is 0. Okay, but if your parents have a high school or less than a high school degree, that's when we see the positive effect. Okay, similarly, white collar jobs versus blue collars or unemployed, and parents who do not work from home versus parents who were at least one works from home. Okay, so this program was helping kids whose parents had lower education and were working mostly outside the home. Then on the socio-emotional skills, again, we see relatively little variation, except for this marked improvement, again, with the parents with less than high school and not working from home. What's very interesting is, for me at least, this effect on well-being, okay? So this was the effect on depression and happiness. You see, again, no gender differential, but this positive impact is entirely driven by immigrants, okay? Which were, remember, about 23% of our sample. So these are the kids who potentially suffer the most in terms of isolation from networks of friends during lockdown, because there's nothing automatic in connecting with your friends as is automatic going to school every morning, okay? So the fact that they could talk to the tutor probably made a difference for their well-being, okay? And again, this is something that we hadn't necessarily expected, but came clearly out of the data. Then I told you those were characteristics where we thought we might see a differential impact, but we also ran a causal forest algorithm to see which dimensions of heterogeneity got picked up. And the algorithm pretty much confirms what the analysis before has shown. So the two columns are basically the summary statistics of the variables that you see on the left for the bottom 50% and the top 50% of the students in terms of predicted treatment effect. Okay, so we use the causal forest to predict the impact of the program, and then we say who are the kids in the top and in the bottom half of these predicted impacts. And you see that those with high predicted impacts, so in the rightmost column, are those with are more likely to have learning disorders. They have lower grades to start with in maths, Italian, and English, okay? And their parents are more likely to be from lower socioeconomic status, for example, having a mother who has a blue-collar job, okay? And so somehow the dimensions that the algorithm picks up are very similar to ours. Also, the algorithm picks up very clearly that for the well-being impacts, the ones who benefit are much more likely to be immigrants than not, okay? And from low socioeconomic status and with parents who are not working from home, okay? So, last set of heterogeneity is by tutor characteristics. So here we thought that maybe male and female tutors would perform differently, but we're finding very, very similar impacts both from male and female tutors. So there's no relevant dimension. Of course, one might say it's not the gender of the tutor that matters, but the match, okay? Maybe boy-boy or boy-girl. And again, nothing shows up, okay? Meaning that when you test whether these are different, they're never statistically different from each other. So there seems to be no clear effects from matching one gender with another. Surprisingly, we thought that university students who had a higher GPA would be better tutors. No. You see the learning effects, the impact on performance is not statistically different, although it kind of goes in a slightly higher direction for the high GPA tutors. And on the other dimensions, if anything, it's the opposite, but again, very imprecise. Tutors with and without volunteering experience perform similarly. And tutors who in a survey said that the reason they were joining was to help others also function in a similar way when it comes to performance, okay? These tutors seem to be a bit more effective instead when we look at aspirations or at well-being. But in performance, no, they're equally good. Last thing, what are the treatment effects on the tutors themselves, okay? Here, because there was this random assignment, we can look at university students who were selected to be tutors and those who volunteered but got a message from us saying, sorry, for this time we cannot assign you to a student. And we have only two measures that we collected on them because we were, we were afraid that the non-selected tutors wouldn't reply to anything that looked like a questionnaire. So we sent it as just two sets of questions. One is about empathy. So we asked them if they found it easy to put themselves in someone else's shoes and if they were able to make decisions without being influenced by people's feelings. So these are two of the indicators that I used in psychology to measure empathy. They were on a 1 to 4 Likert scale, and then we created an index. And the other thing was beliefs, okay? So we thought that maybe by interacting with these kids and seeing the struggle or, you know, the families that was behind them, they might reassess their views about how important income differences were compared to effort, how important was hard work versus connections, and also what were the chances of getting a good job after studying hard, even if you had a modest family background. So we wanted to see whether these type of preferences were affected. And what we found was that empathy was definitely affected. So we see that the university students who tutored for 6 weeks have significantly higher empathy. Sorry, I didn't say this. This was measured in September. Okay, so it was measured basically over 3 months after they finished tutoring. So they are more empathic, but their beliefs in the importance of effort versus luck don't change. Okay. Conclusions. We find that the program affected academic outcomes, in particular test scores, but also the assessment given by teachers, aspirations, socio-emotional skills, and well-being. In terms of what we're doing now, the program has been scaled up for the entire school year. And this time we are treating 800 students. The distribution is much more uniform because by now all of Italy has been affected. So we have more schools also from the south, which is the poorer part of the country. We are launching a pilot in the Dominican Republic, probably starting next month. In that case, we are also experimenting with half, in this pilot, half of the tutors will have a one-to-one relation with the kid, as in our program in Italy, but half of the tutors will have groups of 3 kids. Okay, so this is just because we want to understand how scalable this might be in terms of numbers in countries where maybe the supply of tutors might be more rationed. And so I know I spoke to Bernardo today, who told me that he's done or already maybe something similar in Mexico, and where they're working with groups of students instead of one-to-one. So for now, we are not planning on experimenting with group size or anything, but we will try as well the 3 students versus, 3 kids versus 1 kid match and see how that works. And as I said in the beginning, we think that this could have potential advantages for low-income countries. The cost is certainly one feature. The supply of qualified tutors that could come from different regions is, we think, another important feature. Of course, this is subject to internet reaching there and families having access to a minimum level of technology. In some places, you know, a smartphone might already be too expensive. So I want to just conclude with thank you, because I feel that this is really the tutors who did all of this and not us. But these are the 2 colleagues who helped us with the design of the training program. They are in the School of Education in Milan, and these are the pedagogical experts who did the counseling sessions. And then I told you we were kind of running a small NGO because we had to manage the program. And so there was this mix of Kennedy School students and Bocconi students. Some of them were research assistants, some were RAs. So this was taken during one of our team calls, and they were great because, again, they were the ones troubleshooting with the schools, the families, and so on. So that's it, and I think I will stop sharing, and I'm right on time.